Hi, I'm Leah. I used to be a correctional officer for the state of Florida, for the Florida Department of Corrections. I served at one of the worst prisons in the state of Florida, which is saying something if you know anything about Florida. I had to work night shifts mostly, about damn near 7 days a week because of all the forced overtime they've been wanting us to do. And, my job mainly, on paper, it's to correct inmates so that way they can go back into society a better person. In reality, though, I'm just making sure that they didn't kill each other.
Yep, so my name's, well, I won't give my name, but I'm G. The reason I won't give my name is because I'm currently serving member of Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service in the UK. I am what's known as an OSG, an operational support grade, so I'm not a prison officer, but I do interact with the prisoners on a regular basis in a Category B local remand centre. The majority of my job revolves around prison operations, so ensuring that food deliveries are made on time, intelligence is gathered from phone calls, mail monitoring, property is issued correctly, prisoners are moved to and from locations safely, driven to hospital or driven to other prisons safely, and the control room is always staffed and monitored. I can agree with quite a lot of my American colleagues' statements there, where the job is to rehabilitate. However, the aim of the game was to make sure they didn't kill themselves or each other or other staff.
What was day-to-day life like at the prison?
I get in at night time right as the sun was about to go down. So go into work, I clock on. I receive pass downs from the person who was in the dorm before me, and I pretty much just sit there and watch the inmates because at this time, basically, all work is done. They've had their yard time. I give them their mail when it's time to give them their mail, and then I do the count with another person, the master count and the standard counts throughout the night, make sure we have everybody. And then in the morning, go back to where I clocked on. I smell the coffee that the morning shift made. Then I clock off and go home.
So my average day depends on three things. So on a night shift, it's quite similar. I will surrender my phone, tobacco, vapes, tinfoil, batteries, anything that could be deemed as prohibited inside a prison. Surrender that all into a mobile phone locker. I'll then proceed through an enhanced gate where I get searched for metallic objects, given a full rub down search, sniffed by a drugs dog, and then I proceed into the prison, draw my keys, and either go up to one of the wings to begin my night patrol, or I will operate the main gate until a time where we enter a patrol state, where I will then go and monitor phone calls. At night, in a prison, not a nice place to be. All the, I'd say, social prisoners, the ones that fit into prison society, are fast asleep at that point, or chilling out. It's the ones with severe mental health problems or suicide issues that are up all night, causing you problems, ringing their emergency bells, which you have to answer within 2 minutes, keeping you running up and down the stairs all night, every night, for 7 nights straight. But that's only what a night shift looks like. A day shift looks pretty much the same to start off with. I'll go in, get searched, get my keys, and I'll move into whatever duty area I'm in.
What's the worst experience you've had on the job?
Ooh, that's hard because I've had several. I'll start with the one at the very beginning. My first week, no less. First day, they stuck me in a dorm with another officer to train. It was lunchtime because it was, around the daytime. And it was in the more high security area. So we was letting the inmates out so that way they could go to lunch. And then I had to watch as one inmate tackled another one to the ground and just started stabbing him repeatedly because apparently he stole his boyfriend. And I can't make this stuff up. That's the excuse he gave. And then you go on from there to my third week on the job when I was still new at the time. So I kind of got taken advantage of a little bit. And these inmates, part of a gang, I believe the Crips. I can't remember exactly what gang they were part of, but they were part of a gang. They decided to hold a meeting in my dorm. And it was, again, in the morning time. So it was around the time when inmates were coming to and from jobs or church and stuff. And, I kind of got taken advantage of, but when I tried to restore order, I actually got pushed down, and one of the guard towers had to bring out a warning shot to get everything back in order. And that was the first time when I thought, oh my god, I could die here. I could literally die here. And then to the last time, what made me get out was a riot in the night shift. 2 of my guards got caught in the middle of a riot in our high security area, and me, I wouldn't let them go down like that, so I gathered up a group of COs and we ran right on in there to try to pull them out. You had OC spray going everywhere, tear gas, basically anything we could get our hands on, it was going around. And that's when I took my wounds. Took 2 shanks to my right hip, and at that moment I knew I was hit. I didn't know how bad, but I knew that I had to get out. Otherwise, if I went down, I was never going to get back up. We managed to get the COs out. We got everybody out that we could, but at that point somebody showed me that I was hit and I went down, because that's when it all hit at once. After that, you know, I did work in admin for a little bit, but I couldn't force myself to go back through those gates again, so I had to take a discharge.
Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, it's obviously different in British prisons because there's a lot less prisoners for a start, because we're a smaller country. I think my facility was probably a lower security level than yours, but we still had our fair share of horrific incidents. British prison officers are armed only with a baton and a radio, maybe cuffs if they've been trained on them, which has led to more than one incident I can recall where staff has been seriously assaulted and hospitalised and life-changing injuries have been caused. A good friend of mine was working down the segregation unit one day. Staff had not told this particular officer, my friend, that a prisoner he was going to unlock was a 3-man unlock. So 3 staff needed to be present while unlocking him because he's a dangerous individual. This prisoner then threw a cup of boiling water into my friend's face, causing him to nearly go blind in one eye and causing him serious burns. But that's not uncommon. I'm aware of other officers that have been stabbed in the back of the neck with broomsticks. An officer in his mid-50s who was beaten so badly he had to be off work for 6 months. Yeah, but that's just staff assaults. I can recall harrowing suicide. There was one prisoner while I was working nights who had hung himself. He was on what we call an ACT, which is, to put it shortly, it's a suicide watch document. It tells you how often to check him, and you have to write a short summary about what happened while you checked him. So he was asleep, or he appeared to be asleep on his left-hand side, breathing noted. He was due 4 observations a night, so he was observed at the first roll count at about 9 o'clock. He was then due to be observed again at midnight, which is when we found him. Between 9 and midnight, he'd hung himself, and he was very dead when we found him, blue and stiff. Kind of came to a standstill, really, and then training kicks in, tried to resuscitate, called an ambulance, opened the prison back up to get an ambulance crew inside. Once they couldn't resuscitate him, it was on to the police for a minor investigation to make sure there was no foul play involved, and then our governor had to go and tell his family. The worst bit about that was, though, that the parents of this man who'd killed himself were almost fine with it because she'd lost 2 other sons to suicide in other prisons. And I thought that's quite a harrowing experience to go through, that someone could kill themselves, their son could kill themselves, and, you know, just a part of life.
You were nodding. You've seen things like this before, I take it, Leah?
Suicides, ODs, murders, it almost became a part of normal life. Eventually, you just learn to tune it out, to push it down.
How do you cope with stuff like that?
Not very well. Tends to be smoking, drinking. I can't blame the job for everything that's wrong in my life, but it has ruined quite a lot of relationships that I've had, especially with working hours and things like that. You know, you don't see your friends anymore. All you have is your colleagues. Your colleagues become your friends, and you're all equally fucked up from what you've seen. So it just goes around in this repetitive cycle where day after day you're getting worse, but so are your colleagues. It's kind of uplifting in that way, but, you know, you don't realise how damaged you are until you've hung up the uniform for the last time.
Definitely. It affects you in so many different ways. Like you said, smoking, drinking. It's one thing they never ever tell you about when you go to sign up or you go to orientation, is how badly this job can fuck you up mentally. Even now, I still deal with some of that in my head, especially when I work at my current job sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know how it was in US prisons, but management in UK prisons is famously bad. They give absolute zero fucks about the staff. They will berate you They will abuse you. They will force you to work past your contracted hours by calling it an operational emergency. You know, they've had me on occasions freeze the gate, which means I put the gate keys away and no one can leave the facility until the orderly officer has told me that I can release the gates. It's just a continuing cycle of abuse. They don't give a shit about you because they don't want you to be in the job for more than 5 years because they don't want to pay your pension.
It's different for us. Some sergeants, some officers for us, they're good people. My night shift captain, he would always look out for us. He'd always make sure we were doing fine. And if we needed to take a mental day because of what we've seen, he'd always approve it for us because he knows how bad it is because he's still on the floor. He does the patrols as well. He does the guarding as well. So he knows what it's like. But then you go into major up to warden, and that's where the fuckery comes into play because, you know, they don't really give a shit. They just want to keep the prison running, and they don't care if you're fucked up. They don't care if you really need to sleep. I've seen people do 48-hour shifts because of them. All right, and at that point past 48, you're just so exhausted to where they just go into the car and they just pass out in their uniform.
I can't imagine someone who's been working for 48 hours can do their job right, you know?
Past the 25-hour mark when it's just autopilot.
There's so many examples. I think I'll say the same thing as you said. It tends to be more towards the senior management. So your governors or your assistant governors, deputy governors, your uniformed grades typically are all right. There's one or two that are just cunts, but you'd be all right with uniformed, yeah. But the thing is, with the governors, they've got no excuse to be that way. They started in uniform. They went up through the ranks into their suits, but all of a sudden it stopped becoming getting the job done. It became getting their bonuses.
That's how it is with wardens over here, you know. They start from the bottom and go all the way to the top. They're in their suits. Now they get to live near the prison with a fancy ass house with probably really good internet and such. And it becomes, they don't care about us. They just care about making sure their prison runs, making sure they get their bonuses and all the likes.
I guess it makes sense in a way that with so much power over so many people, you know, they say absolute power corrupts absolutely. If there's any job that would make that happen, it would be that.
Yeah, it's so out of the public sphere of knowledge. In the UK, we have the Official Secrets Act, which means anything the governor says is secret is secret. So a lot of the stuff that I could talk about, I can't because it's under the Official Secrets Act. You know, it's out of the public view, so they think they can get away with more than, let's say, a similar agency like the police. The police is in the public sphere. They're constantly being watched, recorded, audited, whereas the prisons, they're independent. They run as and when they like.
Only people that could touch us was the Attorney General's office for the state of Florida, and even then they definitely did not want to do that.
Because, yeah, we've got an agency called HMIP, which is Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons. We get inspected by them once a year, and every year we get the same abysmal result because we are a terrible prison. We're unhygienic, there's rats, cockroaches everywhere. You know, the prisoners are harming themselves at record numbers because they're locked away for 23 hours a day. I'm not saying that should change because that's made working there a lot safer, but every year we get the same shitty score, and every year they threaten to close us, but we know they won't because where are they going to put all the prisoners? Where are they going to put anyone that gets remanded in our area? Gives us no motivation to do our jobs properly.
I know in America there are private prisons. Leah, was the prison you worked in public or private?
Prison I worked in was public. It was owned by the state. I have trained private prison correction officers before. I've met a few who were in my field training class there for my first 3 weeks, and they get better pay, they get better benefits, and it's like, at first it made me think like, what the hell am I doing here? But unlike them, I get a union. So if anything were to happen to where I needed the union, I would have that covering me. I wouldn't be covering myself.
Yeah, we have, I'm trying to think how many it is. I think it's three main private prison companies that run a few prisons in the UK. We have Serco, G4S and Sodexo. They're the three companies that are allowed to run private prisons in the UK. Notoriously poor prisons. They are understaffed because they cut corners to make a profit. You know, it's not just the management that wants their bonuses, it's the company as well. So you get no support. You know, some of the staff aren't even armed. They don't get batons. They're overcrowded, underfunded, full of drugs, full of phones. Staff will corrupt sacked at the snap of a finger because they get paid nothing, and just makes the job more dangerous for the rest of us.
I could go on a tangent about staff corruption. Stories I've heard, things I've seen. It's there. It can happen. We are notorious for how we deal with it. In the middle of their shift, the local police will arrive at the front gates. We will then take that person, we will strip them of the uniform all the way down to their undershirt and their underwear, and then we will march them right out those gates to the police. And we do not care who's watching.
It's a little different in the UK. You probably won't find out a staff member's corrupt until they've disappeared. You will be talking to someone one day, a couple of days later they'll be gone, and you won't know why. You won't see him again until you see him in the local news for being charged. I can think of one recently where a prisoner was messaging a female member of staff on Facebook with a mobile phone in his cell. And this staff member knew he had a mobile phone, did nothing about it. She went off to join another prison as a prison officer. All of a sudden, one day, disappeared. No one saw her because she'd been sacked, dragged into a police station, charged, was informed never to associate with prison staff again.
If you ever think about doing this job, the one important thing that you need to learn to do is to say no. Because unless it's a medical emergency, you can say no. You say no, shut the fuck up, and get the fuck out of my face, inmate. Because believe me, if you do that 90% of the time, they will learn and they will stop fucking with you.
If I could say one thing about the UK's prison service, don't expect training. Don't expect support. You're on your own. You may have some good colleagues around you, but they won't always be there. They'll either find better jobs or they'll get sacked for doing their job properly. Don't expect anything. Just do the best you can. It's an honourable career. Don't feel ashamed to do it, but just don't get your hopes up.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested. Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested.